fireduplawyer@gmail.com. Reforming America's marijuana prohibition laws takes education, lobbying, and voting. From Washington, D.C. to your state capital to your city hall, marijuana law reform involves all levels of civic life. Learn how you can make your impact with elected officials as we take a look at our government at work.
Hello?
Welcome back, everyone. Joining us today on the telephone for Government at Work, we've got Eapen Thampy from Americans for Forfeiture Reform. You can learn about them at ForfeitureReform.com. Eapen, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Russ. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, although I have a feeling I might not be as fantastic after the interview. Apparently, you found a loophole here, but before we get to that, the big news today is Attorney General Eric Holder announced sweeping changes to the Equitable Sharing program. Give our listeners kind of a thumbnail sketch of what asset forfeiture and equitable sharing is all about, and then we'll talk about the announcement.
Well, in the 1980s, Congress created federal asset forfeiture as a enforcement tool for the war on drugs, and basically the way it works is that the federal government says it can seize and forfeit your property if it thinks that that the property has been involved in a crime. You don't have to be charged, convicted, or tried in a court of law for the government to take everything you own and keep it and use it to fund law enforcement agencies. So that's the issue. So the equitable sharing aspect of it is that so you have a federal agency with this immense power of property seizure and forfeiture, and now they can partner with a state or local law enforcement agency. So the state or local law enforcement agency can bring a seizure to the feds. The feds can do the liquidation of the property. They can turn it into cash. Then they just write the local or state law enforcement agency a check. And so in this way, state and local law enforcement agencies can access a lot of forfeiture revenue that they couldn't under state law, because usually state laws are more restrictive and have more protections for property owners. Uh-huh. So this is a fundamental economic engine of the war on drugs. So, they seize property to fund drug law enforcement, and that becomes the motivation for doing it over time, and it's a very corrupt system.
So this is basically a way for them to do an end around on a state that has reformed its asset forfeiture laws, or even for that matter, legalized marijuana, right?
Well, it's much bigger than that. This is a way for the federal government to commandeer agencies that should be sovereign to a state, because now they can pay the state law enforcement agency to focus on what the federal government wants to do, not on what state law is or what the community of that law enforcement agency wants to. So this is at the heart of it, as well as, whatever a legislature or elected body has decided, money should be allocated. So, at the heart of it, the civil forfeiture law at the federal level is a big way to gut the power of voters and state governments at the expense of, this, federal boondoggle that we call, drug prohibition.
Wow. And I know here in my home state of Oregon, the last forfeiture report that was posted showed $2.5 million in cash and $3.6 billion in assets. What's the scale of this on the national level?
On the national level, the federal government is seizing billions of dollars a year. I don't know what the statistics for last year were, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I think the balance of the federal asset forfeiture fund this year is about $8 billion. They're seizing $6 to $8 billion, maybe a little bit more on an annual level. That's an immense amount of money.
All right. So this egregious violation of our democracy has been going on for decades now. And today, Attorney General Eric Holder announced what seems to be the end of most of it, saying that they won't partner up, allow the local and state cops to partner up on this. Tell us about the announcement and the loophole you found in it.
Yeah, so I'm very afraid that a lot of people in drug policy are being misled by what the policy change actually is. So the way it's being presented is that the Attorney General is limiting the use of equitable sharing, but he left a but he put a big loophole in it that basically swallows the policy change. So here's what the order actually says. The order says that if you're a state and state or local law enforcement agency, the only way that you can have access to unrestricted federal asset forfeiture powers and revenue is through partnership with a federal agency. So this policy does prohibit state agencies acting on their own to bring an asset forfeiture to the feds, and that is designed to maybe correct abuses that we've seen in some jurisdictions, most notably Belle Harbor, Florida. Belle Harbor, they had a police agency, a law enforcement agency there that was sending informants to California, New York, all over the country, setting up drug deals that people would come to Belle Harbor with cash. The local cops would seize the money, and they were bringing in $10 to $15 million a year this way. And the feds eventually said, you guys are way too corrupt, we're going to stop this. So what Holder's policy change today means is that a town like Belle Harbor, Florida, could not unilaterally start this kind of asset forfeiture activity. Instead of the local agency performing all the investigative work and doing all the things, they would have to now partner with a federal agency. And that's a little bit more difficult because federal agencies have fewer resources and not as many officers.
So it's really just moving this from the state or local cops by themselves to kind of incentivize them to partner up in a multi-jurisdictional task force along with the feds. Am I following it right?
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what's going on here. Eric Holder just increased the incentive for state and local law enforcement agencies to make these partnerships with the feds because that's the only way they get federal asset forfeiture money on an unrestricted basis.
Okay. So as this is being portrayed by many in drug law reform, even myself, when I first announced, I said, this is like a big brick of the Berlin Wall of Prohibition coming down. Is that going to be the practical effect? I mean, is there at least a symbolic effect from this taking place? Is it going to help any?
I think the only effect here is really symbolic. And that is because, for the Attorney General to say, I'm restricting the use of asset forfeiture is kind of a nod to the transpartisan consensus that's emerged that this system is responsible for, an epidemic of rights violations and property seizures that are more in tune with the Soviet Union than the United States of America. But so there's that political reality that I think Holder is acknowledging, but he's very clever in crafting the exception to, kind of swallow the policy. So nothing is really changing here in a very fundamental sense. But the policy change itself is an acknowledgement of how far the political reality is from the government's position.
We're speaking with Eapen Thampy from Americans for Forfeiture Reform. You can learn more about their cause at ForfeitureReform.com. So, Eapen, what would you like to see happen next? Eric Holder's already quit the AG job. He's just still there because no one's been appointed to take his place. And it kind of seems like he's trying to do some legacy building here. He's also announced some things about mass incarceration and so forth. What would you like to see Holder do next on this issue?
Well, I'd like to see Eric Holder do a lot of things. I'd like to see him unschedule marijuana. I'd like him to end the Equitable Sharing program altogether. But, if wishes were wagons, I'd be, so the saying goes. I really have no faith in Eric Holder and the new Attorney General nominee, Loretta Lynch, to make the necessary policy changes. Congress has to act. We have to build a bipartisan coalition in Congress that is invested in the fact that civil forfeiture has to end, that we cannot let law enforcement agencies profit from their activities, and that we can't let the federal government essentially give state and local law enforcement officials an excuse to ignore their own state laws.
Making changes here at the federal level, it's such this big lumbering bureaucratic beast. Sometimes it takes forever to turn it around. are there positive things happening at the state level you can tell us about when it comes to asset forfeiture?
Minnesota's done a lot of excellent reforms lately. Oregon, I think, has some good things for other, especially in terms of the reporting statute you guys have, has a good law for you guys to emulate, for a lot of people to emulate. I'd really like to see a state go ahead and ban civil forfeiture entirely and kind of lead the way. And in some aspects, these battles are much easier to fight at the state level because you can demonstrate very easily how egregious the abuses are, and I think that really makes an impact in state legislatures.
And speaking of abuses, we've got one of our live listeners in the chat room who mentions that Florida cops got $15,000 from me, only claimed $5,000 though. They pocketed $10,000. How much corruption is endemic in this system?
I mean, the whole system is rotten through and through. The only solution is to really abolish it and start over with a better system, a post-prohibition system. And, hopefully we have, in this movement, the strength and the intellectual fortitude to propose those solutions and to work for their enactment. So, you guys in Oregon totally took a big step forward, in November by ending marijuana prohibition, and that's one step in the puzzle. There's a lot more to go, though.
Okay. Eapen Thampy is with Americans for Forfeiture Reform. And before we let you go, Eapen, do you have any contact info or websites you'd like to help people out with, get some more information, or maybe even contribute to your cause?
Well, you can make a donation and visit the website at ForfeitureReform.com. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/ForfeitureReform. And if you're interested in a quote from me about this policy change, you can email me at eapen@ForfeitureReform.com. EAPEN@ForfeitureReform.com. It's Eapen Thampy from Americans for Forfeiture Reform. And, as far as our criminal justice system goes, this is one of the, as far as I'm concerned, no-brainer. It seems odd that our government should be able to steal from people without proving they've committed even a crime in the case of civil asset forfeiture. We thank you so much for the hard work that you're doing, and thanks for joining us again here on the show. Thanks, Russ.
All right. So Eapen Thampy, good friend of the show, and it just reminds me that there's so many aspects of this, of ending the war on drugs, that we all have to be fighting for. There is a niche for you. No matter what area you want to get involved in, there is a activist group that is working hard to help you in that cause. Asset forfeiture reform. We spoke with Catherine Sevchenko on free speech at the college campus level. There's medical marijuana. There is so much to get involved with, and this is the time to get involved. Prohibition is ending. The Berlin Wall of the drug war is falling brick by brick by brick. Never been a better time to get involved. Check out your local NORML chapter, your SSDP chapter, your Americans for Safe Access chapter. Get involved with law enforcement against prohibition. There are many ways to challenge your activist agenda. That's all the time we got for today in Hour 1, but stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls at 971-533-7111. A couple of stories we're working on for Hour 2 include Native Americans in Minnesota exploring whether or not they want to grow marijuana, and Mother Jones Magazine on the IGOTS mine syndrome in California. Plus a look at legalization in Vermont. It's all coming up next on Toker Talk Radio. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers. Go Pack, go!
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.